There's been one sort of like U.S. government official that's really become the face of this U.S. policy right now, and it's Rear Admiral John Kirby. I mean, you know John Kirby. I'm sure we talked about him on the show before. I mean, he's been like I said, the
Yeah,
mouthpiece for some of the most slanderous lies.
He's replaced Ned Price as the guy who squirms on the podium.
But Felix, did you see him wearing like an IDF dog tag at his latest press conference? It was a
Oh no,
dog tag given to him by the father of one of the hostages, and he was wearing the dog tag to be like, bring them home. But I was wondering, like, remember Elon Musk? He wore Israeli dog tags to the Deal Book Summit. Felix, have you seen these fucking dog tags? They're like the size of playing cards. They're ridiculous.
It's a very strange design. I mean, it is very much fashion over function. But with Elon, I don't think it was so much a pro-Israel thing. I think it was like he's recently lost a bunch of weight on Ozempic, and he's just trying out a bunch of stupid new outfits. But yeah, John Kirby wearing them just looked even more like an asshole.
Well, John Kirby, he's becoming a star, and I'd like to talk about this Washington Post profile of him. And the astonishing thing about this is that, like, it's pretty clear if you read this article that the Biden administration and the U.S. government thinks he's doing a fantastic job. And the thing is, I guess that's not so hard to believe because he is doing a fantastic job of basically committing wholeheartedly and unashamedly to every fucking lie imaginable to justify our policy towards Israel and to justify the killing. But like, this Washington Post profile of him is pretty interesting. I'm just going to read a little from it. It says the headline is John Kirby becomes a commanding presence in the briefing room. The retired Rear Admiral and National Security Council spokesman has stepped up in the White House to keep Biden's Gaza and Ukraine messaging clear. And I guess this is his reward for by keeping it clear. I mean, like pre- pre- presenting our policy vis-a-vis Ukraine and Israel in a way that is like flatly absurd and idiotic and hypocritical to like the entire eyes of the world, but he does it in a way that's angry and he doesn't back down. So for the Washington Post, he's doing a very good job, and he's, quote, now a commanding presence because he says that Hamas is doing genocide.
It is not the Israeli Defense Forces strategy to kill innocent people. It's happening. I admit that. Each one's a tragedy, but it's not like the Israelis are sitting around every morning and saying, hey, how many more civilians can we kill today? Let's go bomb a school or a hospital or a residential building and cause civilian casualties. They're not doing that. They're trying to go after Hamas, and it's a very difficult task. When Hamas, oh, by the way, in addition to deliberately slaughtering people, is deliberately hiding themselves in residential buildings, in hospitals, in tunnels, putting the innocent people of Gaza directly in the crossfire. Now, you tell me, is that right?
This year, after another day of crisis in Gaza last month, a reporter asked John Kirby if, in a White House press briefing, whether President Biden's support of the Israelis' military response against Hamas constituted support for genocide against Palestinians. The National Security Council spokesman was having none of it. This word, genocide, is getting thrown around in a pretty inappropriate way by a lot of different folks, Kirby said, before turning the accusation around. What Hamas wants, make no mistake about it, is genocide. They want to wipe Israel off the mat. And if we're going to start using that word, fine, let's use it appropriately. It was a typical Kirby response, direct, plain spoken, and unmistakably supportive of the administration's pro-Israel policies. So, like, yeah, this is his reward for getting up there, is like, a flattering profile in the Washington Post. But I guess, like, in reading this for me, the first thing that struck me is that he's a former Navy guy. He's a retired admiral, and there's just something, I don't know, inappropriate to me about a Navy guy talking as tough as this asshole. Could you at least get a Marine out there? This guy has literally never not been in an air-conditioned office.
These guys are like the Uber drivers for Marines.
Yeah. It says, officially, the retired Navy Rear Admiral speaks for the Security Council and advisory branch of the White House. But the twin crises in Gaza and Ukraine have had the effect of giving Kirby, 60, an even more prominent role as the Biden administration's point person on both topics. One self-described fan of Kirby is Gordon Jandreau, who was an NSC spokesman during George W. Bush's presidency, when Kirby was working for then Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Admiral Mike Mullen. He's done a nice job of joining the briefings and being a strong national security voice during a very complicated time, Jandreau said. Reporters say they values Kirby's experience and insider knowledge, as well as his way of framing complicated geopolitical issues. God, what a way to put it. Yeah, we really appreciate his framing of these complicated geopolitical issues, which is that Israel is not doing genocide and is, in fact, protecting themselves from one. At times, he can be a little too colloquial. Last week, noting Ukraine's need for additional military aid and the uncertainty of congressional approval, Kirby told reporters, "We've got a few more weeks here, and then we're out of Schlitz." A reference likely to mystify anyone under 60. It's a riff on an old ad slogan. When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. We've got to do a beer run to Ukraine.
Didn't they just make a movie about that?
Yeah. I was about doing a beer run to Vietnam. Get our boys a cold one. But this guy, Felix, I mean, whenever I see this guy, I think of you because whenever I see his presence behind the podium, it invokes in my mind the specter of a golem. And like to me, it seems like he is some sort of like inanimate clay that has been imbued directly with the soul of Donald Rumsfeld. Like it was just sort of siphoned right out of his asshole on his deathbed into this lump of clay, who's now a rear admiral and on the Security Council.
Well, there is an element that he has that Rumsfeld doesn't, which is like the fake crying. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, Rumsfeld never cried.
Yeah, that was one thing I respected about Rumsfeld. But yeah, this guy, like, he burst into tears when he was talking about, like, you know, Russia bombing hospitals and, like, the horrors in Ukraine. And then, you know, not even months later is, you know, hey, these things happen in war.
Yeah, like, you're right. He received the empathy patch so that he could evince tears for people Russia kills. But then, like, as soon as it's Palestinian hospitals being shredded by Israeli artillery or snipers, then he gets in the classic Rumsfeld mode of grinning, smirking, sort of skull face, like condescension and slander. But yeah, no, I mean he's a real beaut.